We all know the story of Christopher Columbus, right? He sails the ocean blue and lands in America and says, I have discovered a new land. Meanwhile, the Native Americans watching him from the beach are thinking, Bro, we've been living here for 10,000 years. We are not lost. You are. History has a funny way of doing that. We call it the Columbus effect. It is when you get credit for finding something that someone else has been using for centuries. And nowhere is this more hilarious, and by hilarious I mean frustrating, than in the field of space and astronomy. We grow up learning that the Greeks were the fathers of logic and the Renaissance Europeans were the fathers of science. We think Galileo invented the solar system, Newton invented gravity, and before that, everyone just thought the world was a flat pancake like resting on a turtle. But today I'm going to ask you to open the spam folder of history. Because inside that folder, buried under the centuries of colonial dust, are the receipts, the proof. But here is a spoiler alert. Ancient India didn't just look at the stars. They calculated their zip codes. They weighed the earth. They clocked the speed of light. And they did it all without telescopes, without satellites, and without Wi-Fi. Let me tell you how they did it. Let's start with the big one, gravity. We all know the story. Sir Isaac Newton in the 1600s. He was sitting in a luscious British garden. An apple falls on his head, bonk, and suddenly Newton goes, Eureka! An invisible force pulled this down. It's a great story, but let's travel back in time about 500 years before Newton got bonked. We are going to the 12th century to meet a man named Bhaskara II. Bhaskara was a genius. In his book, the Siddhanta Shiromani, he asks a simple question, why don't we fly off the earth? And he answers, the earth has an attractive power by which it draws heavy things to itself. Humans and things appear to stand on the earth, but in reality, we are being pulled. He literally used the word Akarshan Shakti, which means the power of attraction. But wait, hold my chai. Let's go back even further. Let's go to the 7th century. Brahmagupta. Brahmagupta wrote, it is the nature of the earth to attract and keep things, just as it is the nature of water to flow. Newton defined the mathematical law of gravity, which is brilliant. But the concept, the idea that Earth is a giant magnet, Indians knew that when Europe was still debating if bathing was healthy. If Newton is the father of gravity, I'll say Brahmagupta is the grandfather who left the blueprints in the attic. Now let's talk about the shape of the earth and where it sits. For a long time, the Western Church had a bit of a PR problem with the solar system. They insisted the earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around us because, let's be honest, humans are narcissists. When Galileo said, actually we go around the sun, they put him under house arrest. Meanwhile, in India, around 499 AD, that's 1,000 years before Galileo, a 23-year-old math prodigy named Aryabhatta was writing the Aryabhatya. Aryabhatta was the guy who would ruin your dinner party with facts. He stated clearly, the earth is round, the earth rotates on its own axis, and the stars aren't moving. We are moving. He said, just as a man in a boat moving forward sees the stationary trees on the bank as moving backward, so are the stationary stars seen as moving towards the west. Think about that. No telescope, no drone footage, just pure mathematical intuition. And then there's the eclipse. In many cultures, an eclipse was terrifying. Dragon was eating the sun, panic, scream. In India, we had the mythology of Rahu and Ketu swallowing the sun. But you know what? That story was for the masses. For the astronomers, they weren't buying the dragon story. Aryabhatta wrote the math. He said, the moon obscures the sun and the great shadow of the earth obscures the moon. He had calculated the timing of eclipses so accurately that his formulas are still used to determine the dates of festivals today. So while one part of the world was burning witches for doing math, Indian astronomers were calculating the diameter of the moon with 1% accuracy. Okay, this next one is controversial. It drives the skeptics crazy, but it's too fun not to share. Let's talk about the speed of light. Modern science established the speed of light approximately 186,000 miles per second, and that was in the late 17th or early 18th century. But let's look at the 14th century commentator on the Vedas named Sayanacharya. He was commenting on a hymn about the sun, and he wrote, the sun traverses 2,202 yojanas in half a nimisha. Now if you convert the units, a yojana is an ancient unit of distance, approximately 8 miles. A nimisha is a unit of time which is like a fraction of a second, like the time it takes to blink. If you do the math, and people have done the math, it comes out to roughly 185,000 to 189,000 miles per second. How? How did they know? Was it a lucky guess? Maybe. But that is a very specific number to guess, because the modern number is 186,000 miles per second. And it was not just one. There is the Hanuman Chalisa. There is a line, Jug Sahasra Jojan Par Bhanu. It describes the distance Hanuman leaped to catch the sun, thinking it was a fruit. Now look at this. Jug or Yuga is 12,000 years. Sahasra is 1,000. In Yojan is 8 miles. Multiply this. 12,000 by 1,000 by 8. You get 96 million miles. The modern calculation of the distance between Earth and the Sun, 93 million miles. We are off by a small margin, but we are in the ballpark. For a mythological poem, that is suspiciously accurate. It suggests that these numbers, distance, speed, light, were part of the cultural memory. They weren't just discovered in a lab, they were chanted in temples. This is my favorite part, the scale of the universe. Up until the 19th century, Western science and religion were arguing that universe was about 6,000 years old. 4004 BC was the date given by Bishop Ussher. The Indians were looking at the West like 6,000 years. That's cute. That's not even a Tuesday for Brahma. Hindu cosmology deals in numbers that break your calculator. We have the yugas, we have the Mahayugas, we have the Kalpa, which is the day of Brahma. One day of Brahma is 4.32 billion years. Wait, how old does modern science say the Earth is? 4.5 billion years. See how close our calculation is. This is why Carl Sagan, the legendary astrophysicist, was obsessed with India. In his show Cosmos, he filmed a segment in India. He said, "The Hindu religion is the only one of the world's great faiths dedicated to the idea that the cosmos itself undergoes an immense, indeed an infinite number of deaths and rebirths. It is the only religion in which the time scales correspond to those of the modern scientific cosmology." While others were thinking in thousands, India was thinking in billions. We understood deep time. You understood that the universe is massive, old, and cyclical. We didn't fear the infinity. Friends, we mapped it. So, why does this matter? Am I telling you this so that we can gloat? So we can comment on YouTube videos saying India did it first? Well, maybe a little. It's fun. But the real reason is to break the stereotype. For too long, the narrative has been that science is a Western invention and spirituality is an Eastern invention. The map tells us West is equal to telescopes, East is equal to horoscopes. But the history shows us that in ancient India, telescope and the horoscope, the science and the spirit were not enemies. They were like roommates. They sat in the same brain. The same rishis who meditated on the soul were calculating the circumference of the equator. We don't need to look at the West to validate our history. We just need to translate our own exploration, gravity, heliocentrism, the speed of light, the age of the universe. This was all laid down by men in dhotis sitting under banyan trees doing math in the dirt. So the next time you look up at the night sky, remember, you aren't just looking at stars. You're looking at a puzzle that your ancestors solved a long, long time ago. Thank you and Jai Hind.